The hospice room smelled of antiseptic and impending rain. My grandmother, Eleanor, was a wisp of the formidable woman who'd raised me, her vitality siphoned away by the cancer. My father, her son, had not come. He was too busy, his secretary said. A corporate merger in Zurich couldn't be postponed. It was the final, predictable note in a lifetime of his absences. I held her papery hand. "I'm here, Gran." Her eyes, still a sharp, lucid blue, found mine. She had something left to say. It was costing her. "Lena," her name a breath. "The Willow, the old one, by the creek, at the family house? Dig. At the base, on the east side. There's a tin box." I leaned closer, my heart aching. "Okay, Gran, I will." Her grip tightened with a surprising strength. "What's inside? It's the truth. About your mother. About him." A tear escaped the corner of her eye, tracing a path through her wrinkles. "My greatest sin was my silence. I thought I was protecting you. I was just a coward. Gran, don't forgive your father, Lena," she whispered, the words a desperate final plea. "Please, when you understand, try to forgive him." Then her eyes changed. The urgency faded, replaced by a distant, peaceful look. She was no longer seeing me, but something beyond. She smiled, a small, secret smile, and was gone. The funeral was a quiet affair. Distant relatives, her church friends. My father did not come to that either. A massive floral arrangement arrived from his office, a corporate tribute that felt like a sneer. The card read only, "In sympathy," no signature. I inherited the old Victorian house in the Hudson Valley where she'd raised me after my mother's death. My father, successful and remarried in Manhattan, had no interest in it. "Liquidate it," he'd said on our one tense call. "The land is worth more than the memories." But the memories were all I had, and now a secret was buried under a willow tree. A week after the funeral, I drove upstate. The house was a lonely sentinel, its gardens wild. The giant weeping willow by the creek was just as I remembered, its trailing branches a green curtain against the summer sky. I'd played here as a child, believing in fairies. With a small gardening trowel, I dug at the base on the east side as she'd instructed. A foot down, the metal struck something with a dull clink. I cleared the earth with my hands, pulling out a small, rusted biscuit tin. Inside, protected by waxed cloth, were 3 things: a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon, a man's signet ring I didn't recognize, and a beautiful, tarnished silver locket. My hands shook as I opened the locket. Inside were 2 tiny photographs. One was of my mother, Celia, young and laughing, a face I knew only from a few framed pictures. The other was a man, not my father, a handsome stranger with kind eyes and a strong jaw, wearing a military uniform. Beneath the photos, engraved on the inside of the locket's lid, was an inscription: "To see, my heart, always. Yours, J, 1985. The year I was born. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. I untied the letters. They were love letters, passionate, poetic, achingly tender, from J to "My dearest Celia." They spoke of stolen moments, of plans, of a love that had to be hidden. The final letter was different. It was in my grandmother's handwriting, dated 2 days after my mother's fatal car accident. "Dearest Jacob, Celia is gone. The police say it was an accident on the wet road, but my heart screams it was despair. She couldn't see a way out. She couldn't bear the lie anymore, or the pressure from Charles. She never got to tell you. You have a daughter. She was born in May. Lena. Charles has claimed her as his own, to avoid scandal, to protect his political ambitions. He has threatened to destroy you, your military career, everything, if you ever come near. He is a powerful, vengeful man, and I, God forgive me, am afraid for the baby. I've agreed to raise Lena as Charles's child, to keep the secret. Celia wanted you to have this. She wore it always. I'm burying it with this letter where you two used to meet. If you ever find it, know that you had a daughter and she was conceived in the truest love I have ever witnessed. Forgive an old woman her fear. Eleanor. The world tipped on its axis. The trowel fell from my numb fingers. The letters fluttered to the grass. Charles was my father, the cold, distant CEO. Jacob was the man in the locket, my mother's true love, my biological father. My entire life, my identity as Charles Kingston's neglected daughter, my resentment toward him for his emotional abandonment, my longing for the ghost of a mother I never knew, was built on a foundational lie. My father wasn't cold, he was a calculating imposter, and my grandmother, my rock, had been a silent guardian of a truth that broke me. Forgive your father, Lena, she'd begged. Which one? The grief was a tsunami, followed by a rage so white-hot it stole my breath. Charles Kingston had stolen my mother's happiness, my real father's rights, my truth. He had imprisoned my grandmother in a lie to protect his reputation. He had let me grow up in the cold shadow of his disdain, all while knowing I was a living reminder of his shame and his wife's love for another man. I clutched the locket, the metal biting into my palm. I had a name, Jacob, a soldier, and I had a mission that burned away all my sorrow. Find him and make Charles Kingston pay.
Finding Jacob was the work of a month of obsessive, quiet searching. The letters had no return address, but the signet ring had initials, JMW, Jacob. The uniform in the photo was U.S. Army, 1985. My mother's name was Celia Vance before she married Charles Kingston. I hired a discreet investigator. The report came back in a plain envelope. Jacob Michael Walsh, honorable discharge, Captain, U.S. Army, 1986, a decorated career cut short. Current residence, a small town in Oregon. Never married, no children on record. Owned a modest bookstore. He was alive. He was 58 years old. He had no idea I existed. The confrontation with Charles came first. I needed to hear the lie from his mouth. I went to his Park Avenue office, bypassing his shocked assistant. He looked up from his desk, irritation flashing across his patrician face. Lena, this is unexpected. If it's about the house sale. I placed the open locket on his immaculate blotter. Then I placed my grandmother's letter beside it. I said nothing. His eyes dropped. I watched the color drain from his face, saw the perfectly manicured hand tremble as he reached for the letter. He read it, his jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. The facade of the unflappable titan cracked, revealing the terrified, cornered man beneath. "Where did you get this?" His voice was a strained whisper. "Where she buried it. Where you made my mother meet her lover because you were too proud to give her a divorce and too ambitious to have a scandal." My voice was calm, deadly. "You let me think you hated me because I reminded you of her. But it's worse. You hated me because I reminded you that she loved someone else, that you were never my father at all." He leaned back in his leather throne, deflated. The fight was gone. "What do you want?" "I want you to look at me and say it. Say you knew." A long, terrible silence. "I knew." "And you kept him from me. You kept me from him." "He was nobody, a soldier with no family, no future." Charles spat, a last flicker of venom. "I gave you my name, my resources." "You gave me a cage of lies and called it a legacy," I said, gathering the locket and letter. "I don't want your money. I want you to live with this every day. I want you to look at your wife, your other children, and know you built your perfect life on a theft. I am going to find my father, and you will not interfere. If you do, the Wall Street Journal will get a very interesting package." I left him there, a hollow king in a glass tower. The victory felt ashen, but it was a necessary clearing of the ground. The flight to Oregon was a journey into the unknown. I was terrified. What if he didn't believe me? What if he was angry? What if he didn't want me? The bookstore, the last chapter, was warm and smelled of old paper and coffee. A bell tinkled as I entered. A man with graying hair and a neat beard was on a ladder, shelving books. He had the same kind eyes from the photograph, now lined with time. "Be right with you," he said in a gentle, measured voice. I couldn't speak. I just stood, clutching my purse where the locket lay. He climbed down, turned, and saw me. He froze. His eyes, the same shade of hazel as my own, scanned my face. I saw the shock hit him in waves, confusion, recognition, a dawning, impossible hope. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice unsteady. I pulled the locket from my purse and held it out, open, on my palm. He staggered back as if struck, his hand flying to his chest. He looked from the locket to my face, back and forth. Tears welled in his eyes instantly. "Celia," he breathed. Then his gaze locked on mine. "Oh my God!" "My name is Lena," I whispered, my own tears falling. "Celia was my mother." He didn't hesitate. He crossed the space between us in 2 strides and pulled me into a fierce, crushing embrace. He was trembling. He smelled of wood smoke and old books. "Lena," he sobbed into my hair. "My girl, my daughter, all this time, all this lost time." We sat in the back of his shop for hours, talking, weeping. He told me their story, a whirlwind love affair while he was on leave, her trapped in a miserable society marriage to a controlling man. They'd planned to run away. He'd written to her after his discharge, but the letters were returned. He'd gone to the house. A woman, my grandmother, had met him at the door, terrified, and told him Celia was dead and wanted nothing to do with him. He'd been shattered. He'd drifted, his heart broken, never knowing about me. "I felt her loss every day," he said, holding my hand as if I might vanish. "But I never dreamed I had a piece of her left."
I stayed in Oregon for a month. I got to know my father. Jacob Walsh was everything Charles Kingston was not. Gentle, present, curious. He loved poetry and bad puns. He taught me how to bind a book, and I told him about my life as a graphic designer in New York. We were strangers, yet the connection was instant and profound, a missing piece sliding into place in both our souls. The genetic echoes were everywhere, my smile, my stubborn brow, even the way we both tilted our heads when thinking. One evening, he showed me a small box. Inside was a stack of faded poems, handwritten. I wrote these for her. I was going to give them to her when I saw her next. He handed them to me. "They belong to you now." I brought him back to New York, to the old house under the willow. I wanted him to see where she'd lived, where she'd buried their secret. We stood together under the trailing branches. "This is where she left your memory for safekeeping," I said. He knelt, placed his hand on the earth, and wept. It was a healing sorrow. We decided to confront the past not with more vengeance, but with light. With Jacob's cautious blessing, I arranged a meeting, not with Charles, but with his other children, my half-siblings, Michael and Sophie. They were adults, closer to my age than I'd like to admit. I showed them the evidence, the locket, the letters, the DNA test I'd quietly taken. I told them I didn't want their money or their name. I just didn't want to be a family secret anymore. They were shocked, hurt, but not entirely surprised. They'd always felt the chill between Charles and me. Michael, the older brother, said quietly, "He's been a difficult father to us too. This explains a lot about him." There was pity in his eyes, for me and for the man who had raised us. We have a fragile, new understanding. We are not close, but we are not enemies. As for Charles, I granted my grandmother's dying wish in my own way. I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. The hatred was a poison I no longer wanted to carry. I sent him a single line. I know the truth. I have found my father. I release you from your lie and from my anger. Do not contact me again. He never replied. The real transformation was in the life Jacob and I built. He split his time between Oregon and the old Victorian house, which we restored together. We turned the sunroom into an artist's studio and a library. He met my friends. I helped him in the shop during summers. It was quiet, ordinary, and profoundly healing. On the first anniversary of my grandmother's death, Jacob and I planted a new tree next to the old willow, a young oak for strength and new growth. We buried the rusted tin box at its roots, now containing a new letter from me to my mother, telling her we had found each other and that I finally understood her love. I still wear the locket every day. Inside, I've added a third picture, a small photo of Jacob and me smiling outside his bookstore. My grandmother's last words were a plea for forgiveness for the wrong man, but in leading me to the truth, she gave me the incredible gift of the right one. I thought finding the locket would be about uncovering a sin. Instead, it was about unearthing a love so strong it survived decades of silence and lies to finally bring a father and daughter home. The willow tree no longer hides a secret. It shades a new beginning, its old roots and new growth intertwined, just like our family.